Hello, teachers, pianists, colleagues, and friends. Today we're talking about how to teach the Polonaise in G minor, Opus Posthumous by Frédéric Chopin. It sounds like this. If we haven't met before, my name is Jana Williamson, and welcome to my home piano studio in the suburbs of Chicago. Who doesn't love Chopin? A lot of pianists love Chopin. I know many of them consider him their favorite composer. Unfortunately, he didn't write very much that's accessible to intermediate students. I do have a few other videos featuring easier Chopin pieces that you are welcome to check out in the description of this video. But I also wanted to mention that my Patreon partners are gathering for a workshop Friday, August 28th, 2026, if you're watching this in real time, which will just be an overview of Chopin for students. And so that inspired me to cover this on the YouTube channel. I'm not going to do too much introductory talk. We'll dive right into this piece. And if you'd like to talk more about Chopin and think about his intermediate and early advanced works, you would be more than welcome to join us at that workshop. This is one of the earliest pieces composed by Chopin that we know of. He composed this when he was 7. And so that opus posthumous notation there is that he did not publish it in his lifetime and he did not authorize it for publication. It has since become well loved because it is easier than so many of Chopin's other works. And as I said, it's accessible to intermediate students. It's also relatively simple and not his mature style like we think about in so many of his bigger works. But that's okay. It's still a very, very valuable teaching piece. It's a Polonaise, which is a Polish dance, of course, and Polonaises are marked by this rhythm that's the 1, 2, that almost militaristic feel. Students do need to understand 16th notes, and they need to know that particular pattern and dotted patterns. And that would be one of the main teaching points for me, is just that idea that we're in 3/4, but with that yum, bum, 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 bum. One of the other big teaching points for this, for me, would be the key signature that we're in G minor with a modulation to the relative major B flat. And as I said, it's relatively simple. We have mostly tonic and dominant chords in this. So for an intermediate student, this is an excellent study in basic chord harmony within a piece in a minor key with its relative major. Even that part with the Polonaise rhythm is just G minor and D7. It sounds pretty great for just being 1 and 5/7 chords, right? Same thing is true of the very opening. It's G minor to D7, and then just back, D7 to G minor. When we get to the B flat section, starting at measure 13, we have the exact same pattern of 1 to 5/7, and then back. So you can do a very quick, easy analysis, and then you can talk about inversions. When did Chopin put the root of the chord on the bottom, and when did he put some other note on the bottom? And if your student is learning Roman numeral theory, this is a great vehicle for even practicing those dominant 7th inversions. You know, the 5/7, the 5/6/5, 5/4/3, 5/4/2. So all that to say, it's a great vehicle for that theory. We have some different ways of breaking up those chords. In measure 17, we have this kind of like a pa, like a reverse waltz. We have Alberti later on in 27. In some interesting inversions, it starts there in the first inversion of the B flat triad. And we have what I think is the most Chopin-esque accompaniment pattern in this kind of jump bass thing at measure 23. So you play the root of the chord down low, and then you come up for either a root position triad or an inversion of the triad higher. Down to the F, and then back up for the F7. We certainly encounter that in many of his more difficult works, nocturnes, waltzes, many things. So that's a good little accompaniment pattern to highlight. Before we go back to the opening, I thought I would highlight some of the right hand issues in measure 13 down to the end. The first one is that in this section at 17 up to 22, we have both grace notes and ties, and those are things that can interrupt a technique of playing a melody. So I always recommend playing first without grace notes because it gives you the principal melody, and then you just tuck them in later. So at measure 17, that would be. Now, measure 22 is not a grace note, that's an appoggiatura. And if you're using a good student edition of this, you will see it written out as 2 quarter notes. I'm looking at this today in Masterwork Classics Level 8, and Jay McGraw does a lovely job of realizing all of the ornaments and appoggiaturas for us. So there's no question, you don't even have to know much about performance practice to get those sounding beautiful. So once you've played without the grace note, you can just tuck it in, or you can even play it at the same time as the principal note it goes before, like this. And then you just think you go just ever so slightly before. The main thing you want to avoid is emphasizing that grace note or interrupting the flow of the rhythm. So you don't want, right? I've totally lost my sense of the beat. If I've practiced without the grace notes first, then I know that the B flat is on beat 3. 2. And then just understanding that the ties are part of that rhythm as well. So feeling beat 2 before you go in. I'll do this with the low part. And 3 and 1, 2, 3. Feeling that beat 2, and then it goes right on into 1, 2 E and a 3 E and a 1. That's not hard to do once you're playing with the left hand, and you could even block the left hand. It's just on the beat, and then you can really feel where the 2 E and a 3 E and a comes. Starting at measure 23, we have these beautiful broken chords. So this is one of the many reasons why your students should practice triads. For B flat major, my students would practice and broken for that, and then we would also do that in 4-note chords. Around the time that they're playing this level of repertoire, we would start doing it as 4 notes. So when we encounter measure 23, it's not the same fingering that they would necessarily use if you're using what's in the book here, but they've got a concept for all the notes I'm going to play are in that chord. And then all of these notes are in the dominant 7th chord. So little bits of rotation here and there, making sure your arm is traveling behind your hand and not trying to do, finger motion in one static position, but this is traveling down. Getting your weight behind the pinky again for that G. That one you can use more rotation just because of how that dominant 7th chord is laid out. The turns right after that, again, McGraw has them written out here, but they are just 30-second notes, starting on the note above, turning around the F, and then coming out of it. So measure 29, appoggiatura, and those appoggiaturas should have a nice 2-note slur gesture, which takes us back to the very beginning. These opening chords have a slur on them. They are a 2-note slur. It should very much, because this is allegro maestoso, at least that's what McGraw has marked it. I don't think Chopin wrote that. But the idea that this is a polonaise, it's a very confident sounding dance that we have with this nice big opening left hand octaves. It should have a very clear more, less. So big arm weight drop, especially listening for the weight to be calibrated onto the pinky there for the top note. And then a gentle beat 2. So you're thinking down, up, down, up. And I do like to use follow through, like you don't go down and then lock. You follow through as if you're swinging a tennis racket and it goes all the way through. You don't stop when you hit the ball mid-swing. So follow through, and then much lighter on the second one. You can practice this with just one single note, or the left-hand octaves. One little quick tip, when you have a loud chord at the very beginning of a piece, I prefer to put the pedal down before I actually play anything. That just gives right away full resonance to all of the sound, all of the notes in the chord. Sometimes students see the arpeggio in measure 5 and they kind of get like deer in headlights because what are all those little tiny notes? So I have regularly taught this by rote, not have them read it. I'll just show them right hand here, left hand here, right hand. How fast can they do right, left, right? Then we might break that up. And lastly, add the octave. So left hand goes first. And then once you actually play it, it really doesn't matter if you keep this exactly in rhythm. It can take a full beat because the top D lands on beat 2. So if we're a little under tempo, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. They don't have to play it that fast, but you can get it. Now I would advise against really ripping it if you're playing at a fast tempo. So if you're doing you don't want to rip it so fast like that because it will be too loud and it will detract from the melody. Instead, think of it as just like a jumping off point up to the high D, and then you continue your beautiful melody after that. And that's something you will have to work on with your student. Again, getting the arm all the way over here, getting the weight behind it with, I had a teacher who used to say steel pinky, not meaning that it was rigid, but just that it was very strong and it could support a lot of weight and make a lot of sound. And I apologize, that note is still out of tune on my piano. It will be tuned soon. I hope that gives you some ideas for teaching this intermediate piece by Chopin, one of the few available to our students at this level. Do check out all the links in the description of this video, and I wish you all the best in your teaching and playing.